Catherine the Great was a woman with an insatiable hunger for both passion and power. Her rise to dominance was fueled by cunning alliances and illicit affairs that left even her closest allies in awe. Beneath the allure of her reign lay a tangled web of betrayal, lust, and conspiracies that threatened to destroy everything she built. These are the 15 things you did not know about Catherine the Great. Her long-distance romance with Voltaire. Catherine the Great and Voltaire never met in person, but their connection was strong. They exchanged hundreds of letters over the years, talking about politics, philosophy, and personal matters. Their correspondence began in the early 1760s and lasted for more than 15 years. Both admired each other's intelligence, ideas, and vision for a better world. Catherine was greatly influenced by the ideas of the Enlightenment, and Voltaire was one of its leading figures. Their letters show a deep mutual respect and admiration that went beyond simple diplomacy. Catherine often asked Voltaire for advice on political and social reforms she hoped to bring to Russia. She discussed ideas like improving education, ending torture, and modernizing Russia's legal system. In return, Voltaire praised her efforts to introduce these progressive ideas to Russia. He called her the Star of the North and admired her ability to lead with both wisdom and strength. Even though they never met, Voltaire kept a portrait of Catherine near his bed. He didn't just see her as a ruler, but also as a thinker. Their relationship was based on shared intellectual curiosity. Catherine often confided her frustrations about the resistance she faced from the Russian nobility. Voltaire, always supportive, encouraged her to push forward with her plans for reform. When Voltaire died in 1778, Catherine was deeply saddened. She later bought his entire personal library and added it to her own large collection of books. Their relationship, built on letters and shared ideas, remains one of the most famous intellectual partnerships of the time. Her plot to overthrow her husband. Catherine the Great didn't simply rise to power, she took it by force. In one of the boldest moves of her time, she led a coup against her own husband, Peter III. Their marriage was strained from the beginning, and after just 6 months of Peter's reign, Catherine decided she had to act. The only way to secure her future was to seize power herself. She worked closely with several powerful allies for years, including her lover Grigory Orlov and his influential brothers. They were key figures in the Russian military. Together, they planned the coup carefully, making sure to gather support from both the army and the nobility. Fortunately for Catherine, Peter was deeply unpopular with the people and the military. His erratic behavior and weak leadership only made it easier for Catherine to rally support. In July 1762, Catherine saw her chance. While Peter was away at a palace outside St. Petersburg, she gained the loyalty of the key military units stationed in the city. With their backing, Catherine declared herself the ruler of Russia. She then marched into St. Petersburg, where her supporters proclaimed her empress. Peter was quickly taken into custody, and just a few days later, he was forced to sign his abdication. Not long after Peter's abdication, he died under mysterious circumstances while still in custody. Many believe Catherine ordered his assassination, though no direct evidence proves this. Regardless of whether she was involved, Peter's death removed any lingering threat to her rule. Catherine was now free to govern Russia, and she did so for the next 34 years. She wasn't actually Russian or named Catherine. Catherine the Great is famous as one of Russia's most well-known rulers, but she wasn't born Russian. She was born Sophie Friederike Augusta von Anhalt-Zerbst in 1729 in what is now Poland. Her family belonged to minor German nobility, and there was little indication she would one day rule an empire. However, her ambitious mother arranged her marriage to Peter III, the heir to the Russian throne, which changed her life forever. Before becoming Catherine, she had to transform to fit into Russian society. First, she converted from Lutheranism to the Russian Orthodox Church. This was a requirement to marry Peter III. As part of this conversion, she took on a new name, Catherine, or Yekaterina in Russian. This change was more than symbolic. It helped her gain favor with the Russian people. they were more likely to accept her as one of their own, after she adopted their faith and name. Catherine's adaptability didn't stop with her name and religion. She also learned the Russian language and studied the country's customs. She worked hard to connect with the Russian nobility. Despite being a foreigner, she embraced her new role and became a key figure in Russian politics. She even outshined her husband Peter, who was considered unpopular and ineffective. Though Catherine was not born in Russia, she became one of its most celebrated rulers due to her hard work, diligence, and excellent political acumen. Illegitimate children. While Catherine the Great was married to Peter III, their relationship lacked affection. Both Catherine and Peter had numerous affairs during their marriage. It's widely believed that Peter III wasn't the father of most of Catherine's children. Historians agree that, of her 4 children, Peter III was likely the father of only her eldest son, Paul I. The paternity of her other children remains a topic of speculation. One of Catherine's most famous lovers, Grigory Orlov, played a big role in her life. Orlov was important both romantically and politically. He helped Catherine stage the coup that overthrew Peter, securing her position as Empress of Russia. Many believe that Orlov also fathered Catherine's second son, Alexei. Their relationship lasted many years, but Orlov never held an official title as her husband. However, he remained a key figure in Catherine's court for a long time. Catherine had several other lovers throughout her reign. These relationships were more than romantic. They often had political purposes. Many of her lovers were influential military leaders or statesmen. They helped her maintain control of the Russian Empire. In return, Catherine rewarded them with titles, estates, and wealth. Catherine's personal life and political career were deeply connected in ways that were unusual for rulers of her time. Her affairs were not hidden from the public. Despite this, she managed to balance her romantic relationships with her duties as a leader. Inadvertently removed part of her jaw. One of the most unusual stories about Catherine the Great involves a serious medical mishap. In the 18th century, medical practices were far less advanced than they are today. Dental procedures, in particular, were risky and often dangerous. Catherine experienced this firsthand when she went to a doctor for a toothache. During the procedure, the doctor made a grave error. He didn't just remove the tooth, he accidentally took out part of her lower jaw. Without modern anesthetics or surgical tools, this type of mistake was sadly common. It could have easily left Catherine with permanent disfigurement. Amazingly, Catherine managed to avoid any lasting visible damage to her face. It's still unclear how she recovered without significant scarring. However, she was incredibly fortunate to escape serious complications from such a traumatic event. This incident shows that even rulers like Catherine, who had the best care available, were still vulnerable to the dangers of 18th century medicine. Dental treatments were especially dangerous, often performed by untrained or poorly equipped practitioners. Despite this painful ordeal, Catherine maintained her public image. She continued to project confidence and strength throughout her reign, never allowing this experience to affect her leadership or appearance. She never consummated her marriage for 7 years. Catherine the Great's marriage to Peter III was far from what anyone expected. It's widely believed that their marriage remained unconsummated for the first 7 years. During this time, Peter III seemed more interested in his toy soldiers than in his wife. This wasn't just a personal issue, it had political implications. An heir was expected to secure the future of the throne. The lack of intimacy in their marriage caused widespread gossip in the Russian court. Catherine's frustration with her husband's indifference was no secret. She found herself isolated in a foreign court. Her husband didn't seem to care about his duties as either a husband or a ruler. Peter's focus on military toys and his lack of interest in ruling left Catherine feeling neglected. It's said that Peter even brought his toy soldiers into their marital bed. This left Catherine deeply frustrated and humiliated. During these 7 years, Catherine began seeking companionship elsewhere. Eventually, these relationships turned into political alliances. Her romantic liaisons with men like Grigory Orlov were not just about love. They were also about power. These relationships helped her build the alliances she needed to secure her place in the Russian court. Though their marriage was never strong, Catherine and Peter eventually had a child together. However, there has always been speculation about whether Peter was truly the father. Catherine's many affairs during this time left the child's paternity in question. She bought Voltaire's entire book collection. Catherine the Great loved reading and had a deep passion for knowledge. During her reign, she built one of the largest private libraries in Europe. By the time of her death, it held over 44,000 books. One of the most interesting parts of her collection was Voltaire's library. Catherine and Voltaire exchanged letters for many years, talking about politics, philosophy, and Enlightenment ideas. They never met in person, but their intellectual connection was strong. When Voltaire died in 1778, Catherine quickly moved to buy his entire library. This collection included more than 6,700 books. She had them shipped to Russia, where they became a key part of her growing library. Catherine didn't stop there. She hired Voltaire's niece to take care of the collection. His books were kept in her Winter Palace library, and she treated them with great care. For Catherine, these books were not only valuable, but also a sign of her link to Enlightenment ideas. Buying Voltaire's library was more than just a way to collect books. It showed Catherine's respect for Enlightenment philosophy. She wanted to be seen as an intellectual leader in Europe. In her eyes, she was a ruler who could connect Russian autocracy with European progressive thought. Peter III's impersonator uprising. One of the most unusual events during Catherine the Great's reign was the uprising led by Emelian Pugachev. Pugachev, a Cossack, claimed to be her dead husband, Peter III. Even though Peter had been overthrown and killed after Catherine's coup, many believed Pugachev's claim. This wasn't just a minor disturbance. Pugachev managed to convince many that he was the legitimate Tsar. The uprising attracted thousands of peasants, Cossacks, and even some soldiers. Pugachev's message of revolt resonated with the discontented lower classes. They were suffering under serfdom and harsh conditions. He promised to restore peasants' rights and end serfdom. This gained him support from people who were frustrated with Catherine's policies. The revolt soon grew into a major rebellion, spreading across southern Russia. For months, it seemed like Pugachev might actually succeed. His followers truly believed he was the rightful Tsar, despite the fact that Peter III was long dead. Catherine saw this uprising as a serious threat to her rule. It challenged her authority, and she had to act quickly. She organized her military forces to crush the rebellion. After months of bloody fighting, Pugachev was finally captured. At 1775, he was executed, and the rebellion came to an end. The fact that Pugachev's revolt gained so much support shows how unstable Catherine the Great's early reign was. It revealed how fragile her hold on power could be, especially in such a vast empire. Founded the first state-funded higher education for women, Catherine the Great was not only known for her political power, but also for her work in education. One of her biggest contributions was co-founding the Smolny Institute for Noble Maidens in 1764. This institute became the first state-funded higher education school for women in Europe. At a time when women were mostly kept out of formal education, this was a bold move. The institute was set up to educate young women from noble families. They were taught subjects like history, literature, and math. Catherine believed educated women could make positive contributions to society. She wanted to create a new generation of informed, intelligent women who could help shape Russia's future. The Smolny Institute wasn't just focused on academics. It also taught social skills that noble women were expected to know. Students learned etiquette, music, and the arts. These lessons prepared them to be wives and mothers in high society. But Catherine's vision was bigger than that. She wanted these women to think critically and take part in the intellectual life of Russia. The founding of the Institute reflected Catherine's progressive ideas about education. She wanted to modernize Russia, and this school was part of that plan. Even though the institute mostly served the daughters of nobles, it marked an important step toward offering more educational opportunities for women. At the time, this was unheard of in many parts of Europe. The Smolny Institute remained a prestigious educational center for many years. It remains one of Catherine's lasting legacies in her efforts to advance the role of women in society. She refused to help the British during the American Revolution. During the American Revolution, the British asked Catherine the Great for support. Britain was struggling to keep control of its American colonies. They believed Russia's strong military could help them win. Specifically, the British wanted to hire Russian soldiers to suppress the rebellion in America. Catherine the Great, however, wasn't interested in the conflict. She didn't see any benefit for her empire. While Russia had a powerful military, Catherine had no reason to send her troops so far away. The war didn't serve Russian interests, so she declined the request. This surprised many, given the strong diplomatic ties between Russia and Britain. Her refusal wasn't just about avoiding unnecessary conflict. Catherine had her concerns at home. Russia was facing internal challenges, including unrest in the Ottoman Empire. There were also issues along its borders. Sending troops to help Britain would have weakened Russia's military in regions that mattered more to Catherine's empire. Catherine also viewed Britain's request as risky. Aligning too closely with Britain could have isolated Russia from other European powers. Many of these powers were neutral, or quietly supporting the American colonies. Catherine was smart and understood the fragile balance of European politics. She didn't want to harm Russia's standing by getting involved in Britain's colonial struggles. In the end, Catherine's decision to refuse Britain helped keep Russia neutral during the American Revolution. This allowed her empire to stay focused on its interests and avoid a distant war. The myth of the horse. One of the strangest and most persistent myths about Catherine the Great is the false story involving a horse. According to the rumor, Catherine died while trying to engage in intercourse with a horse. This claim, however, has no truth to it. The tale began circulating shortly after her death in 1796 and has overshadowed many real events from her life. The truth is much simpler. Catherine died from a stroke at the age of 67. Strokes were a common cause of death at the time. There is no evidence to support any inappropriate event involving a horse. Still, the rumor persisted, mainly due to the scandalous nature of her personal life. Catherine had many lovers throughout her reign. Her relationships were well known among her court, making her an easy target for gossip and slander. This horse myth was likely created by her political enemies, both in Russia and other countries. They wanted to damage her legacy by shifting focus away from her political achievements. By spreading this absurd rumor, they aimed to make her appear ridiculous. During a time when women in power were judged harshly for their personal lives, it's not surprising that such a shocking rumor took hold. Even though there's likely no truth to it, the myth has lasted for centuries. It continues to come up in modern discussions about Catherine's life. Unfortunately, this falsehood has distracted from her real accomplishments as one of Russia's most important rulers. While her personal life was often controversial, the horse story is simply an outrageous rumor with no historical basis. Her enlightened reforms, a failed utopia. Catherine the Great had big dreams of transforming Russia into a modern and fair society. One of her key attempts at reform was through a document called the Nakaz, which she created in 1767. The Nakaz outlined laws she hoped would bring justice and equality to Russia. It included ideas like banning torture and the death penalty. It also declared that all men were equal under the law. These ideas were revolutionary at the time, especially in a country where harsh punishments and inequality were common. Catherine's goal was to create a humane and just legal system. She wanted Russia to align with the ideals of the Enlightenment. To achieve this, she gathered a group of people called the Legislative Commission. Their task was to discuss and implement these reforms across the country. Catherine hoped they would support her ideas and work together to create a new legal code for Russia. However, things didn't go as she had hoped. The Legislative Commission was made up of nobles, clergy, and other powerful figures. They had little interest in the changes Catherine proposed. They were more concerned with keeping their own power and privileges. This meant that making life fairer for the average Russian citizen was not a priority for them. As a result, the nakaz was largely ignored, and most of Catherine's ideas never became law. Despite her efforts, Catherine's attempt to create a more equal and enlightened Russia failed. The commission was eventually dissolved, and Russia's legal system remained much the same. Still, the nakaz showed that Catherine was ahead of her time. Even though she couldn't fully achieve the changes she wanted, her work left a lasting mark on Russian history. It influenced future reformers who would later try to continue her efforts. Patron of the arts. Catherine the Great had a strong passion for the arts, and her reign is often remembered for its cultural advancements. She didn't just appreciate art, she actively worked to transform Russia into a leading center of culture, comparable to Western Europe. Before her reign, Russia was relatively isolated from the cultural movements happening in France, Italy, and other parts of Europe. Catherine made it her mission to bridge that gap. One of her most notable contributions was the founding of the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. Originally, this museum started as Catherine's private collection. She had a taste for acquiring art from all over Europe and collected thousands of pieces, ranging from Renaissance paintings to ancient sculptures. What started with a modest collection of a few hundred works quickly expanded into thousands. By the end of her life, the Hermitage housed over 38,000 items. Today, it stands as one of the largest and most prestigious museums in the world, showcasing masterpieces from renowned artists like Rembrandt, Raphael, and Michelangelo. Catherine's love for art wasn't just about amassing wealth or status. It was about enriching Russia's culture and bringing European sophistication to her empire. But Catherine's influence on the arts didn't stop at painting and sculpture. She was a huge supporter of the performing arts as well. She brought in European playwrights, opera composers, and ballet performers to her court, turning Russia into a cultural hotspot. Catherine encouraged Russian artists to explore new styles and forms of expression, which helped develop a unique Russian identity in theater and music. She even oversaw the construction of new theaters and performance spaces in St. Petersburg to accommodate this cultural growth. Catherine's literary contributions were equally significant. She maintained correspondence with some of Europe's greatest thinkers and writers, including Voltaire and Denis Diderot, both of whom praised her as a true philosopher on the throne. She even purchased Diderot's entire library and brought it to Russia, further cementing her commitment to intellectual and artistic endeavors. Catherine the Great understood that art and culture could not only elevate her empire, but also strengthen her influence abroad. By becoming a patron of the arts, she ensured that Russia gained respect and admiration on the global stage. Her legacy as a cultural visionary still lives on today, particularly in the institutions and artistic movements she helped to create. Her extravagant spending. Catherine the Great was known for her love of luxury, and her spending habits reflected that in a big way. She had a strong desire to surround herself with the finest things, and she didn't hesitate to spend vast amounts of money to make sure she lived in style. Her personal taste was extravagant, and she often indulged in expensive art, lavish furniture, and massive building projects that showcased her wealth and power. One of her most famous indulgences was the construction and expansion of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, which became a symbol of her reign. The palace was filled with beautiful artwork, sculptures, and rare objects from around the world. She didn't just spend money on herself, though. Catherine was also a generous patron of the arts, commissioning works from European artists and bringing a touch of Western European culture to Russia. This helped solidify her image as a sophisticated and cultured ruler. But her spending didn't stop at buildings and art. Catherine was also known for her extravagant gifts, especially to her lovers. She would shower them with land, money, and valuable items, making sure they were well taken care of even after their relationship had ended. In some cases, Her lovers were given titles and positions of power, which helped them remain influential long after their time with her was over. However, this lavish spending did come with its drawbacks. While she was admired for her taste, there were many who criticized her for wasting money on luxuries while parts of the empire were struggling. Some of her critics felt that she could have used the funds to improve conditions for the average citizen or to invest in more practical projects like infrastructure or military upgrades. Despite the criticisms, Catherine the Great remained committed to her lifestyle and saw her spending as a way to not only enhance her own life, but also to strengthen her image as a powerful and cultured ruler. Her lovers had contracts. Catherine the Great is well known for her many lovers, but what's even more fascinating is the formal structure she imposed on these relationships. Unlike most monarchs who kept their affairs secret or let them evolve naturally, Catherine took a much more calculated approach. Her lovers weren't just romantic partners. They were often given formal contracts outlining the terms of their relationship. This wasn't only a matter of personal pleasure. Catherine made sure that both parties understood their roles and rewards. These contracts guaranteed her lovers certain privileges, ensuring they benefited from their time with her, even after the romantic relationship ended. The terms of these agreements usually involved generous financial rewards, titles, land, and sometimes high-ranking positions in the Russian court. In essence, her lovers received long-term security, often living the rest of their lives in luxury due to the wealth and status bestowed upon them by Catherine. These relationships, though romantic, were always conducted with a level of political and personal strategy. One of the most notable examples of this arrangement was her relationship with Grigory Potemkin, one of her most famous lovers and trusted advisors. Their romantic relationship was intense, but it eventually transitioned into a deep, lifelong friendship and political alliance. Even after their romance ended, Potemkin remained one of Catherine's closest allies, helping her shape the future of the Russian Empire. Catherine ensured that Potemkin was well compensated for his loyalty and service, granting him wealth, land, and significant influence in the Russian government. Potemkin's case wasn't unique. Other lovers, such as Stanislaw Poniatowski, who went on to become the King of Poland, also benefited from their close relationship with Catherine. Poniatowski's rise to power was, in part, due to Catherine's support, showing how these relationships extended beyond the personal realm into political maneuvering. Catherine's romantic life often intersected with her political ambitions, and these formal arrangements allowed her to maintain control and avoid the instability that could arise from more impulsive romantic entanglements. By turning these personal relationships into formal contracts, Catherine was able to manage her private life with the same level of discipline and strategy she applied to rule her empire. This allowed her to avoid the scandals that typically accompanied royal affairs, as her lovers were loyal, discreet, and well compensated for their companionship. The contracts also provided a way for Catherine to assert her power and independence. She wasn't bound by the traditional expectations of marriage or romantic relationships. Instead, she set the terms, dictating how these affairs would unfold and what both parties could expect. Her lovers understood that while they could enjoy Catherine's favor, their time with her was ultimately on her terms. This level of control over her personal life was rare for a ruler of her time, and it highlights Catherine's ability to balance personal pleasure with political pragmatism. In short, Catherine's lovers were not just romantic partners, but were often rewarded with lifelong benefits, proving that her personal and political relationships were deeply intertwined. By managing her personal life with contracts, Catherine ensured that her affairs were advantageous to her and her reign, allowing her to focus on ruling Russia without distraction. Thanks for watching and stay tuned.